FitzPatrick, Chairman of Anglo-Irish Bank. Thank you for joining us on One to One. I was thinking, if you made a movie about the Celtic Tiger, you'd start with you guys back in your basement in the middle of town, just a tiny little minnow on the Irish banking scene with nothing but your ledgers. It really was a Cinderella story in many ways, wasn't it, the growth of Anglo?
Well, I wouldn't quite call it a Cinderella story, but I suppose the growth of Anglo, looking back, it's very easy to say, God, that was wonderful. But it didn't start like that. I mean, we had no vision when we started out. We didn't plan to develop the way we did. I mean, when we got together, it was just very few people. There was very few people in Anglo-Irish Bank. There was literally 4 people. So to call it a bank was actually a bit of total exaggeration. So, you know, we were lucky with the Celtic Tiger and things went well there. But I think we also developed outside of Ireland as well. So it's been a very interesting time, very exciting time.
How did you go from being one of those little mini banks in a dingy office that kind of had a name but nobody was paying much attention to? How did you go from that to being the third largest bank in the country?
Well, I think partly because of the 2 existing banks. They didn't take any notice of us at all. I mean, they were just very dismissive of us. And in a way that inspired us to actually try to do things. I think also the culture at that stage in the banks was not really appreciating the customer. And we wanted to succeed. And the only way we're going to succeed, because we had the same product as AIB and Bank of Ireland, that was money. I mean, our money didn't buy any more goods than their money. So the only thing that was going to differentiate us from them was the way we actually sold it. So it was really very much people. And the real emphasis was trying to get people that were interested, people that were knowledgeable, people that were really interested in the customer. And it was as simple as that, nothing more.
And you I mean, because we're talking here about the 80s, you know, there was not a lot of money knocking around Ireland.
There wasn't.
And you spotted a gap in the marketplace between the car loan and the very big business loan. Tell me how you went about developing that gap.
Well, we were part of a wider group known as City Dublin Bank, which was involved in the car loans and the leasing, and then we had another small bank within that group called Irish Bank of Commerce, which was really in the merchant banking area. And I then got the job in Anglo-Irish Bank, and as I said, it was only a very small number of people, so I couldn't encroach on my parents' ground in the car loans, and I couldn't encroach on Irish Bank of Commerce. So we aimed therefore then at what I would have called the middle market and the business market. And what I think one of our secrets was that we didn't try to do everything for all men. So really what we did was we focused on quite a narrow menu, but we decided that we could become the best at that menu. In other words, we could specialise within the business sector and we'd be better than Bank of Ireland or AIB, who not alone were doing that sector, but they were doing the leasing, they were doing credit cards, they were doing home loans, they were doing consumer loans. So we were very, very focused on that area. The other big thing which people don't really understand was that in those days everyone either was banking with either AIB or Bank of Ireland. And some customers with AIB and wanted to go to Bank of Ireland. Bank of Ireland would want all of their business. What we said was, look, use AIB and Bank of Ireland, because we didn't want to get into current accounts, we didn't want to get into money transmission. All we wanted to do was lend them money for a particular period of time, get paid the interest and get paid back. So all of our customers were in fact customers of AIB and Bank of Ireland. But when
and you said that was a big breakthrough, figuring out that you could compete with the other banks in a way by not competing for all their business,
exactly.
just competing for this one profitable sector.
And into a particular small segment, and that's where we were very good. And then what happened was the customer, when he came into us, could deal with senior people, and he was able to get decisions fairly quickly. Because they were business people, they weren't going around each of the banks and trying to get how much will this cost and trying to get the cheapest rate. What they wanted was service, and we recognised that. So dealing with the business person, all they wanted was to know where they were, are they going to get the money? And we sort of said, yes, you're going to get the money, or you're not going to get the money very quickly. So we had credit committees that we'd call it a drop of a hat, very flexible, very fast on our feet, as the same from AIB or Bank of Ireland. So when they came in, they were dealing with us. They could get loans for, say, 500,000 or a million or 5 million or 10, 50 million later on as we got bigger. And they had difficulty in dealing with AIB and Bank of Ireland because they weren't geared for that special segment. And then they compared us to AIB because we were banks in their own mind. Of course, it wasn't a fair comparison because we were going to win all the time because we were seen as very responsive, very adaptable, very flexible and hungry to do the business. And we were hungry. And all of the people that I got to work with me in AIB or in Anglo-Irish Bank came from mainly AIB and Bank of Ireland people. So they were no different. We weren't any brighter than our peers or our counterparts in the other banks, but we were hungrier and we had a very clear focus of what we needed to produce to get the business.
But how did you manage to do that and continue to keep the business secure as you were growing and handing out these loans? Because this is what the other banks were running around saying about you guys. And they're nothing but buccaneers. They're nothing but pirates. They take far too many risks, and it's all going to come a cropper one day.
They're a fine bank, but will they last? That was being said about us in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and indeed even in recent years. But we have arrived, and we ain't going anywhere. We are now the fourth largest company on the Irish Stock Exchange. We've got a market capital of over 10 billion. We've got lending now, loan books, that would be bigger than either AIB or Bank of Ireland of 5 years ago. So we have arrived, and we're going to stay, and we're going to continue to progress. And the way we're going to progress and why we're going to progress is because of the culture within the bank and within the people. And because, as I say, there's no big secret to this. This is all about commitment to the customer, commitment to each other, a very clear view of within the bank of what you want to try to achieve, and then creating the opportunity and the platform for that to be achieved.
And you've said, there was no great strategic plan. We were just so busy trying to survive, we couldn't afford to have strategic plans. But there had to be more to it than that. I mean, to achieve something, to have an ambition for something, you have to imagine it first. When you were knocking around the place and people confusing Anglo-Irish Bank with AIB because they hadn't a clue who you were, there must have been a part of you that thought, I'll show them what a minnow's going to achieve. Yeah.
I remember going to dinner parties in Dublin 4, call it, and introduce myself as Sean FitzPatrick from Anglo-Irish Bank, and they'd look at me and say, and someone from AIB or Bank of Ireland would sort of snigger. And I'm absolutely sure, and I would say to my own staff coming back, I said, the day will come when you are at a dinner party and you say you work in Anglo-Irish Bank, there will be silence around the table. Why? Because they want to see who is that professional, talented person. And that day did come eventually. But it was difficult. And of course, getting people from AIB and Bank of Ireland working in Anglo-Irish Bank, they wanted to show their ex-colleagues as well. And every time that we heard rumours circulating what the other banks were saying, and our customers would tell us, it didn't depress us, it actually inspired us, and we were actually going to break through, and so we did.
You thrived on all of that. You thrived on being an outsider, didn't you?
Yeah, because again, it was part of, if you like, the non-establishment, and we saw ourselves not as an establishment bank. We didn't set the bank to make it bigger than AIB or Bank of Ireland. What we wanted to do was do a different type of banking. And we had no direction from anyone else. That wasn't. We just fell into that. And I'd love to be able to say that I dreamed it up and that then set out the plan and then followed it through to actually achieve what we did. It was literally about survival at the beginning. And some people have said to me that we did our strategy backwards. That we claimed the benefit of what we actually achieved. And in some ways, there's a little bit of truth in that. But it really, and I'm not trying to show humility here, it was actually quite simple. It was just getting people that were committed and having a very clear view of what you wanted to do. And the other banks, by their arrogance, by their, conservative way of doing things, actually propelled us as well. So it was actually not so much the strength of Anglo-Irish Bank, it was the actually orderliness of AIB and Bank of Ireland.
You talk about people. You've said this again and again, that it's about getting the right people. And you've been quick to reward people and quick to get rid of them. The one thing that you seem to think is an absolute deadener for business is mediocrity.
Absolutely. There's no point. I mean, business, in any workplace, you want to have people that enjoy it. You want to have people that want to be the best. But what's the point if you're not going to have that group of people? Because you spend so much time at work, you want that. So we were able to bring people into the bank and really offer them the platform to see how good they were. And if they were very good, they zoomed up the organisation. We had no problems about that. We had a very young organisation, so we gave them plenty of opportunity to go, and we paid them very well. If they weren't doing well, or they were mediocre and weren't interested, it sounds terrible now, we were ruthless. We got rid of them. And it was like not allowing a cancer grow in the organisation. I was constantly looking at people with other people, sort of saying, how are they doing, and questioning, are they committed? Because if they weren't committed, we wanted them out. The last thing I wanted was dull-faced people who just didn't care. We wanted to have people that didn't lend money on behalf of the bank, but effectively thought they were lending their own money. And when they were lending their own money, they were going to get it back. If you're lending money on behalf of a bank, you may not take the same care. And I was trying to get that proprietorial culture within them. And that meant, therefore, that they had to see, that that's what was going to be rewarded. The danger about all of that, of course, was that you could get a name for hiring and firing. And if you're going to do that, then you weren't going to get loyalty, then you weren't going to have people, believing in the dream. So we looked after people always very well. We never had a union in our bank. I think we're the only financial organisation in Ireland without a union. And I think that helped us as well, because we were very, very flexible. When in the late 80s or in the mid 80s, there were strikes and threatened strikes in the other banks, and we were opening at lunch hour. We were the first bank to open at lunch hour, even though we had only 4 people. Our ad was, I remember we got Terry Wogan, a legend in our own lunchtime. We couldn't field a rugby team or a soccer team for sports, but we could anyone for tennis. And that was all the type of stuff. So we were non-establishment, but we were professional. So this wasn't a...
what does professional mean?
We were just good at our jobs, I believe. People weren't hired because of who they were, or they weren't hired because they worked in other banks. They were hired because they had ability. And, you don't really need much ability in a bank.
You've only won an honour in your leaving cert,
That's
isn't
right,
that
yeah.
right?
No.
It's not even about academic excellence.
No, it's nothing to do with that at all. This is about common sense. And really, when I used to interview people, and I tried never to interview really senior people within the bank, in the bank premises. I used to try to meet him outside. I used to try to meet him for breakfast. I used to meet him, walk around Stephen's Green many times. I used to try to meet him for a drink, a pint on the way home, or whatever. And I was really all the time trying to say, how do they relate? And no matter how good they were, if they couldn't relate to the customer, or couldn't relate with each other, or couldn't relate with their bosses, or indeed their subordinates, it wasn't going to work. So that was the game. There was no science in this. And if a person came in with a really, really top-class academic background, they would frighten me rather than excite me.
Because they might frighten the customer as well.
No, it was because I suppose the way I saw it was back from school that the real bright kids, were really bright but no personalities, and it was the guys in the middle that had to, make it work, or the guys down at the end that had to make it work. They had to relate, and there's the type of people that I wanted in the bank.
And because of that, you were able to develop these relationships with the people who became the entrepreneurs of the Celtic Tiger, weren't you?
We were, and because what did they want? They want access to money. They wanted with no frills attached, and they wanted to know where they stand quickly. And if they were coming in to borrow 5 million, you're doing them a favour if you say no straight out. Other banks, you'd say, well, I'll take all the details, say, we'll come back to you in 2 weeks' time. We'd say, thank you, but we're not going to do this loan because it's not within our sector, or the ratios aren't right. And if we were going to do it, we'd say, God, this looks good. It's got to go to a credit committee. And we had a rigorous credit committee. And I think the other banks, and indeed maybe the general public, or maybe the financial journalists, thought at one time that Anglo Irish Bank is succeeding because it's taking bigger risks. We never felt that. And I promise you, Anya, we didn't take bigger risks. I think we actually took less risks. What we did was we really studied the customer and what he wanted to do. We knew the particular sort of areas that he was operating in, and we actually reduced risk that way dramatically. Whereas the other banks then were nearly trying to follow us. I used to say to anyone that was going into AIB, just tell them you got a loan approval from Anglo, and then they'll give you the loan. Why? Because they want to keep us out. that happened in the past.
It wasn't all plain sailing, though. There was, in the early years, you're having to go to the markets to raise capital again and again. There's the failed venture into stockbroking. There was the first active takeover that didn't happen. Which of those stands out in your mind the most, and what did you learn from them?
I suppose there was a terrible rumour campaign in the early 90s, which was so unfair, I felt, about Anglo Irish Bank, and that was set up straight up by the other banks. It was appalling what happened, and that really created great fear in me. And
what were they saying?
Well, they were sort of saying, well, Anglo Irish Bank can't continue to grow because, they were paying more money on deposit than the other banks. Well, we weren't. We were just paying market rates, because the way we always operated was we just got the money in to actually lend. We didn't make any money from the deposit base. The other banks were actually getting the money in from the deposit at less than market rates, and then they were making money. We weren't. So we were actually getting more and more money from their existing customer base. And it was a very cruel thing to do, and it was at a really frightening time. But anyway, that was that, and that went over. But that lasted for around about 9 months. You've got some of the failures that we made, and we made lots of failures, and some of them are well known, and some of them, like the stockbroking, the first active one was a great disappointment to senior management, but it wasn't to be, and so we just developed on sort of doing the same thing. One of the big issues, I think, was for Anglo Irish Bank was to widen its its offerings so that we weren't overly concentrated. I mean, people talk about, well, Anglo Irish Bank is really a construction bank, a builder's bank. That's not true. Of course we have builders, we have investment properties, we've got a very wide diversified lending base. And the other thing which we do, which in hindsight now seems to be very, very clever, and that was we didn't fund by borrowing from the wholesale market or from other banks. What we needed to do all the time was to widen our deposit base, which we did, and we only had 4 branches, but yet we got a very, very big deposit base. Why? Because we paid market rates, and that was absolutely critical. I didn't realise at the time, but as we were growing, we always made sure that we had a much bigger customer deposit base than our loan book. And we would never do, so people always talk about the growth in the lending, but in fact the unsung heroes in Anglo Irish Bank were the deposit gatherers, and that has now come, particularly in more recent times, right to the fore. So we're very lucky.
So did you take a kind of an underhand pleasure in getting a lot of customers off, say, Bank of Ireland and AIB when the currency crisis was going on?
Well, an underhand pleasure. Look, what we wanted to do is make more money this year than last year.
But you must have enjoyed again and again getting customers off them or value off them when they were running around saying these guys are too risky to last.
Well, there was a little bit of that. I mean, there was a little bit of self-satisfaction when it all finished, but not really. I mean, that wasn't the game at all. I mean, the game was, just to having a group of Irish people, both men and women, that were working together, that we were going to build not just an alternative bank, but actually a real bank in its own way that will be very well funded, very well diversified, and we were going to go outside of Ireland as well. Because when I was going into banking first, I used to see all of it. I mean, I think there was about 15 foreign banks in Ireland, and I've nothing against foreign banks, but they used to always have the people from either England or from America or from France running them, and I used to sort of say, why can't we do that in Irish Bank? And the only Irish banks were AIB and Bank of Ireland. So that's what drove me in a way. And then when we went to Austria, it was that great pleasure, really fantastic pleasure of being, if you like, the first Irish bank to go out and buy a bank in Europe. So that gave me great pleasure, and indeed the senior executives, and that was good for us because, I mean, we were duffing the hat and things were so difficult in the 80s and the 70s. So it was really an expression of success. But to turn around and say, well, look at that, we took all our pleasure from, taking customers off AIB and Bank of Ireland. No, we were bigger than that.
Could it have happened without the Celtic Tiger?
I'd have to take we benefited very quickly from the Celtic Tiger.
You've been lucky.
But it wasn't just, and we have been lucky. There's no question about that.
Smart enough to recognise.
Yeah, we were very lucky all along. No, we were. I mean, we couldn't have done it without luck. And the Celtic Tiger was really, really important. But I suppose the real success we had was being in a position to take advantage of that. When people say that, well, I mean, of course, Anglo Irish Bank wouldn't have happened without the Celtic Tiger. If you've seen the growth of the bank and you've seen what it's done in Ireland, we're actually more profitable outside of Ireland today. During the growth of the Celtic Tiger, we were also building a really good operation in England, a very nice operation in Austria, and a really, really good operation in the States. So while the Celtic Tiger was very good, and we were very lucky to be there, and we got a lot of luck along the way. And, we wouldn't have succeeded without luck. I mean, I'm very aware of that. I mean, I thank God for the luck, and thank God for the positioning that we had during those great times.
The big talking point in recent years was the fact that when you retired as chief executive and moved on to be chairman, that Tiernan O'Mahony, who'd been with you, you were seen as the team, the core team in Anglo, that he didn't succeed you as chief executive. Was that just a sound banking decision, or did you have any feeling at all that you'd betrayed someone who'd been with you through all those such important years in your life?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. I mean, I would have a huge time for Tiernan O'Mahony, but also there was John Rowan and there was Tom Brown, and they were the other 3 contenders, and then David Drum, who wasn't on the bank board. He was the only one who wasn't on the bank board, and it was David Drum got it. And of course it was difficult. I mean, it was very difficult for me, it was very difficult for Tiernan and for Tom and for John, because they didn't get the job, and they would have each had a relationship with me. And Peter Killen, who was a fantastic guy there as well, although he at that stage had just retired, so he was gone. So it was difficult, yeah. Now, what are you saying to me on
Did you feel a sense of betrayal about that, or is that just business?
No, I mean, I think that's business. You know, I mean, I have responsibilities to them, but I also have responsibilities to shareholders. And it wasn't I that was that was the final arbitrator. I mean, it was the bank's nomination committee, and they took a very, very, very tough decision and a very, very brave decision. Which has since proved very well, because those guys are very good in their own right, but David Drum has done an absolutely incredible job.
And of course, Tiernan O'Mahony then goes off and he sets up ISTC, which is a bank that basically lends to other banks. It's a banker's bank. And he has a who's who list of Irish business investing in this new bank. You're one of them. And then it all goes south. Did you lose a lot of money?
I did. I lost some money there, and a lot of money for me. But I mean, wasn't it wonderful what he did? Wasn't it wonderful what he succeeded in doing? And that was in different times in raising 160 million from private individuals in Ireland, 160 million euros 2 years ago. And he followed his dream and he followed the model. And then suddenly this perfect storm occurred, which no one could have forecast. And, you know, I talk to people about Tiernan because of my old relationship with him, and never has there been a word of anger. There's been a word of sorrow. And that's the way most of the people who put money in with Tiernan feel about the terrible things that happened over the last few months. And it was just a perfect storm, or an imperfect storm for Tiernan. So it was very, very difficult.
Do you ever look at what's happened to him and think there, but for the grace of God, it was just timing, subprime?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what it was. I mean, it wasn't a bad model. It wasn't because he hadn't thought it through. I mean, who had heard of SIVs or subprime? I mean, subprime, when people look back, and they look back at 2007, those two words, subprime, I mean, just incredible. And the amount of it, I mean, it was 300 billion. Which, you know, if you take in America that there's an average loan of 100,000, that means 3 million people all going wrong. I mean, just incredible what happened. So I feel sorry for Tiernan for what happened, but, you know, I also feel, you know, that this guy will come again. This guy's very talented.
Mm-hmm. And of course, what's been happening at ISTC got the market worried for a while about what was happening at Anglo again.
Yeah.
And Anglo, David Drum had to come out and give a very spirited presentation about how secure Anglo is.
Can you imagine, Aine, how we all feel about that? I mean, here we were sitting at the board, all the directors, we knew the figures, we knew exactly the profitability, we knew how strong we were in terms of our deposit base, we knew that the credit crunch was not going to hit us.
But even Swiss banks are getting hit in this crisis.
No, I know that, yeah. But I mean, because
so
a lot of those
worries were reasonable,
well, they were, no, well, I mean, I think that the share price was going down, so therefore people were sort of saying, oh my God, is my money safe? And that created concern. And you know, and was it justified? Well, of course it's justified if it creates concern. And then you had some sort of rumours going out again. But thankfully, David and indeed all his colleagues came out and gave what I think all financial commentators would see as an incredible performance, being totally transparent and really showing totally the inner workings of the bank and the figures, and that was needed to actually bring more confidence back. And the share price returned, and it actually stopped the flow. So I mean, it was even given credit for actually stopping the drop in the Irish stock market.
We're all hearing these words, you know, subprime mortgages, credit crunch. I mean, you've seen bad times before, having been through the 70s
I've seen
and the
really
80s.
Bad times, but there was nothing happening.
How do you read this then? What's going on? How serious is it? What's happening in banking?
Well, I think it is. I mean, I think it's has been serious, and I don't think we've actually seen the worst of it yet. So I think it's going to go on for a few more months, and maybe perhaps still for the next 6 months. So I think it is very serious what's happened, and I think, you know, I mean, the announcement yesterday, where all the central banks are now coming together, sort of really indicates how serious they thought it was. Well, that really means that therefore no bank is going to come under pressure again, not like Northern Rock, and that means that the central banks are now going to come together to ensure that proper situation returns to the money markets.
Has there been a touch of a bonfire of the vanities about it all?
No, I wouldn't say that, but it's been a difficult time. It has been a difficult time. But I think that, you know, we're now just coming out of it. We haven't got out of it yet, and I think that you know, it'll be, you know, late spring of next year before we're finally out. But please God, that's the way it'll work.
How hard is it going to hit Irish banking in general, do you think, before it's all over?
Well, I think that the Irish banks, certainly AIB, Bank of Ireland, have come out with results, and indeed ourselves. We're not subjected to much exposure in SIVs and subprime, so Irish banks will come out of it well. But they've been sold down because, I mean, you know, here we are.
Because the thing is, it's about confidence,
exactly,
isn't it,
and
trust.
Confidence, yeah. But also, I mean, the Irish people, I mean, we're an amazing lot. I mean, here we were. You remember the 70s and 80s, and I remember them well, and we were talking before the interview started. I mean, I remember the time when there was just no hope. I mean, it was just disastrous. And I remember the time going over to England, getting off the plane, getting the tube into the city, going with Jerry Murphy to meet big institutions. And I mean, we really were third division. And look how much has changed all, you know, in such a short period of time. And now everyone is sort of saying, well, the Celtic Tiger's over. Why? Because of the housing crisis. And the housing crisis, look, I remember they weren't selling 40,000 cars in Ireland in the 80s. Now they're selling 180, 220,000. We're doing, I think, 70,000 houses last year. That's going to be down from what it was before. Of course it is, and it's slowing down. But it's only 6.5% of our GNP. Look at the people. I think that the entrepreneurship is embedded in our psychic now. We ain't going to go back to the 70s and 80s. But there is a danger that so many people are talking ourselves into. I mean, I listen to you on Morning Ireland, and I hear what you're saying as well. And it's terrible that people.
All we do is
we've got to turn around. We've got to turn around and sort of say, look, of course things are a little bit difficult, but they ain't anywhere like they were, and I don't think it's even possible that we will. Why? Because of our education system, because of what's been achieved, because of the type of people we are, and. I wouldn't say it's going to be a bed of roses going forward. We have challenges, and we've got to recognise those. But by God, we're in a really strong position to be able to deal with them.
Well, here's another question then. In the whole time that Anglo's phenomenal growth is happening and the success story is happening and the Celtic Tiger is happening, it's also the era of dirt inquiries and customers being overcharged and Ansbacher accounts and politicians getting, you know, nice sums of money from their friends and all the rest. You've given out a lot in recent times about regulation, but something had to happen, didn't it, to clear all that up? We needed the tribunals. We needed this cold eye. I don't know if we needed the tribunals as they've actually come right through, but yeah, of course we did. I mean, we needed to do something. I mean, I don't think that corruption is endemic in Irish business. I do think there are a few bad apples, and there have been a few bad apples. I think the banks, and we ourselves included, were pretty poor. During the whole dirt inquiry. We didn't, as an industry, deal with it. We didn't admit it. And we all knew it was going on, so that was rubbish to turn around and say we didn't know it was going on. We did know it was going on. So those customers were well off enough to know it was going on.
Well, they didn't have to be well off. I mean, you know, small amounts, but people obviously with deposits you may feel that they're better off than people without deposits, and maybe you're right. So yeah, but I mean, and it was happening right throughout the country. And it was an Irish sort of situation. I mean, we were just turning the blind eye. And I was disappointed, and, you know, as part of our industry, the way we dealt with it. And I've got to take some of the blame for that as well. I mean, I wish I'd had the strength to actually stand up and say, this is wrong, and we are culpable, and it needs to be done. But I mean, look at...
There's just one quote I want to put to you here, actually, about that, because your bank wasn't involved in the big offshore accounts or dirt inquiries.
But we were involved with dirt inquiries, and we had a bank in the Isle of Man, but we weren't, you know, we came out all right.
Had customers who had accounts in the Isle of Man. They were examined by the revenue. Now, you said at the time when you were asked about that, it's up to them to declare we weren't sending them any letters. Do you regret that now, taking that approach?
I regret the whole saga of dirt and offshore. Just as much. I mean, it was part of the way we were, and that's not trying to justify it. It's a bit like going, if I was at a dinner party with you 20 years ago, I could well have drunk a bottle and a half of wine, and I would have left you and got into my car with my wife to drive home, and you wouldn't have thought the worst of it. Today, you would be horrified. And we have changed, and we were very slow on that, and we should have actually grabbed that much quicker. And we, particularly in banking, have let ourselves down, and we're paying the price. And we're paying the price because we are not attracting the young people with the talent that we were in the 70s and 80s. And why is that? Because banks just don't have the respect that they had got. A bank, if you just remember a bank in any community, in any village in Ireland, I mean, it was nearly as revered as the parish priest, that's all gone. Why? Because of the banks themselves, because of our banking, and that's a pity. So we've got to work hard, and we have to work hard over a long period of time to re-win the respect and the trust that is very important for any society to have, with not just with banks, but because banks are so fundamental to the infrastructure of any normal society.
Why did you regret pulling out of Goodman after the beef tribunal?
Well, that was an interesting time. When Goodman went into receivership, or not into receivership, into examinership, Bernard Summers was advising him, and he came into us. We were very, very small at the time, and he asked us would we lend him 40 million for Goodman, and I said, "Would you don't be so ridiculous? Our total loan book was 100 million." And he explained to me that it was actually a very good credit because it was guaranteed by the European Union, and so he taught me it all, and we did it, and it was very successful. And once we went in then, well, then Bank of Ireland and AIB came in the next time we were pushed out. So we made good fees on that. And Goodman then came back and said, "Look at Sean, the reason why they're in is because you guys helped us." And then we had a relationship with them that continued on. And then suddenly the tribunal came out, and he didn't come out of that well. And my board looked at me and said, "Why are we dealing with Mr. Goodman when the tribunal says such and such?" And he had been an incredible good customer with us, and I was wrong to actually. I should have fought with the board and said, "No, we shouldn't."
Why should you have done that?
Because I didn't do what any banker should have done, and that was defend the customer that you knew was really good and was very honourable with us the whole way right through.
Even if the tribunal had found that their business practices
well, maybe the business practice, which they were, not business practice with us, they were just very good and very, very strong. And I'm sorry about that. I was sorry about that. That's probably my biggest single regret in any customer dealing I had.
What do you think of the tribunal inquiry into Dennis O'Brien and the mobile phone licence? I asked that he was made Businessman of the Year, which is an award you've won in the past.
Yeah.
Do you think he's been treated fairly?
I think the whole tribunals have been quite unfair to Dennis. I think that for what they were set up for, I mean, I think it's probably going to prove that there was no issues there at all, but they went to wider issues there. And I mean, he's had a tough time there, not for the last year, not for the last 2 years, for the last 7 or 8 years. And I've got huge respect for Dennis. I know him. I've known him mainly through business. The amount of good that guy does, the amount of work he does in both in business and both with charity. I mean, he's just a phenomenal guy. And I mean, it's very, very difficult. I don't know how he survived himself and his wife over the last 7 or 8 years. I don't know how I'd hate to have been him during that period of time.
Why is it unfair of the tribunal to ask
Because, I mean, the tribunal is not a court, Pardon?
Why is it unfair of the tribunal to be asking questions about the licence?
They did, but it wasn't just the licence. Then they moved right around it, and it just got out of sync, and we became nearly tribunal junkies. No one's interested in tribunals any longer. I mean, it was up to 2 or 3 years ago, and it was wonderful for Morning Ireland as well when new snippets came out, but not any longer. People are bored with them now and fed up with them. But anyway, we'll just see what they come out with.
Because you've about a lot about regulation and over-regulation these days. Do you have a sense that, if you like, the entrepreneurship that created the Celtic Tiger, that in all our tribunals and our new regulations and our new standards that we're somehow choking business?
Well, you tell me, Aine, do you think that Irish business is corrupt or endemically corrupt? Or will you say to me there are a number of people there and there? Business, I'd be a very wealthy woman and I wouldn't be asking you questions. No, but it's not. We don't have the Enrons. We never had anything like that. We've never had the scandals that have taken place elsewhere. And of course you need regulation, but you don't need over-regulation. What we need is appropriate regulation, and that's really where the danger is. I mean, ever since you've had these scandals, you know what you get now in non-executive boards? You get, middle-aged, receding-haired accountants just being put on board. Why? Because, well, they'd be good for the audit committees and things like that. That can't be good at the end of the day for business. What you need are a board who represent, if you like, the stakeholders, and that are real people with real experience and that relate to the customers that you're actually dealing with and maybe relate to the shareholders. But if we're all going to run, for the umbrella of safety, not with tribunals but with regulation, then, what we've achieved in the last 10 to 15 years will be easily pushed away. Now, I'm not looking for a free-for-all, Anya, but we don't have a free-for-all here. But I'm looking for some sense and balance in regulation.
No, but you can still have someone like Jim Flavin, and you can have the courts finding that DCC was guilty of insider trading and FICE have to be compensated, and he's still there running the company.
Well, now, Anya, you hardly expect me to comment on that, and I'm not going to comment on that. That's unfair. But what I will say to you is this, is that you show me, I can show you instances where it has occurred, but it's not endemic. And if you're telling me that we have to have changed the whole regulation for all of that, then I think that you're mad.
Doesn't that lack of personal leadership in leading business figures, though, that creates the climate where we get what you would call too much regulation, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that perhaps the business community have been slow in coming out in terms of, things that have happened. I think we have been a bit slow. And maybe we feel that we are being, hounded by the media. And that, well, people would say that in any way. So I don't know, maybe we have been a bit slow. But I don't think that what's happened in Irish business over the last number of years has been something of huge abandon of principles. I think there have been ones where I'm sorry that it's happened, I'm embarrassed that they've happened, but I don't think it is generally representative of Irish business. I think Irish business is very good.
Okay. You quit the chief executive's job at a relatively young age of 56. What's life like as a non-executive chairman? Do you play a lot of golf and smell the roses?
Life is not what I thought in a sort of vague way it would be. And I did think I probably would play more golf, and I did think that probably I would sleep a bit longer. I've just found myself doing different things. So it is different, but I'm happy. Mm-hmm. But I haven't quite reached where, I don't know where I want to reach, but I know it's not where I am now. It's a bit like...
There's still a hunger in there, is there, for something
else?
Well,
I don't know what I want to do. I want to do some other things, but I'm not quite sure what it is. So, I mean, God, that's a hopeless case there for then, isn't it? But I know there's more to be done, and I'm enjoying life, but I'm not as happy or as content as I think, I should be, in a way.
Is that bit of dissatisfaction, though, is that a part of you, and is that part of what's made you what you are? You've spoken about your mother and the influence, the drive that she gave you from very early on. There's one line I read somewhere where you said that your mother taught you always to strive, that enough was never enough.
No, yeah.
Do you still feel that?
Well, maybe that's it. Maybe that is part of it. Maybe it is that sort of, my mother came from a generation that was unique in a way, and that she was unique, but that whole generation who, just after the war, they seemed to, forgo their own ambitions so that their children could achieve. And we were very lucky, Joyce, myself, my sister, that our mother gave us that. But there's a price as well. I mean, maybe that burden is, that maybe enough is never enough. There's always going to be something more. Maybe there is that. I'm not quite sure, but I know that I've got to do some more stuff, and I want to do some more stuff before I get much older.
And did you instill that same drive, that same feeling of enough is never enough into your own children?
Well, they can speak for themselves. You should meet them. And I've got 3 kids. One is 31 years of age, and one is 26, and one is 23. I think that they've come through a lifestyle with me and with Trina, which is very different than the lifestyles which we had with our parents. I'm very proud of them. And I think that they have got their feet on the ground. And they know what values are, which is, what else would you want from your kids?
In another life, if you hadn't been Sean FitzPatrick, banker, what would you have been?
Maybe I would have been a journalist, or...
You were interested in sport. Eric Cantona was what you said.
What I would like, I suppose, what I would have loved was, I would have loved to have been a footballer, played professional football, and then maybe gone to the bar. That would have been what I would have.
You might have made even more money doing things.
It's not about making money, Anya. It's a game. That's what it's all about. It's not, money is just evidence. All the time it's about winning and losing, and that's the way I was brought up. So the money, if you make money, then I can understand if you try to spend it. Well, that's why you try to make it. But that's not what you do. You're not even trying to accumulate it. You just want to win, and that's the way I was brought up.
And you're between games.
I'm definitely between games. Yeah.
Sean FitzPatrick, thank you so much for talking to us one-to-one.
Thank you, Anya.